Great. And then I will hide this. Great. Okay, awesome. So my name's Maureen Murray, and I'm the Assistant Director of One Health at Lincoln Park Zoo's Urban Wildlife Institute. And I'm one of a few partners on this project to evaluate the efficacy of rat contraception in Chicago. Um, Thanks again for joining because we want to make sure that the residents in the areas where we're working are as informed as possible. And you're more than welcome to ask questions. I just have a few slides to sort of explain the project, and then we can get into more of a discussion and Q&A. Um, but right off the top, before I forget to mention it, I'm based at Lincoln Park Zoo, but we are also partnering with the Chicago Bird Alliance, the City of Chicago, and Alderman Timmy Knudsen's office. And so all of our organizations would be happy to answer your questions at any time should they arise. Okay, so how is this going? No, not going to. Great. So I started the Chicago Rat Project back in 2018 with the broad goal of just learning more about rats in Chicago to both prevent health risks from rat infestations and also improve rat management. We do this in two ways. One by studying rat populations directly and testing them for different bacteria and viruses that could cause disease in people. But we also talk to people using surveys and interviews to understand people's experiences with rats and the impacts of rats on their daily lives. And over the years, we've learned a couple of things that have led us to be interested in contraception as a tool to manage rat populations. One is that by testing rats for bacteria and viruses, we found that 10% of the rats we test carry the bacteria that causes leptospirosis. And that's important because this is a disease that can be fatal in both people and domestic dogs. And there was actually a health alert in Chicago last fall because there were more locally acquired cases of leptospirosis than usual. Usually there's like two a year, but there was an uptake to about six cases last year. And so we really want to make sure that people aren't being exposed, to rats around their home and in their yard and in their gardens, to reduce that disease risk. We've also, through surveys, found that people that are exposed to rats in their house on a daily basis are more likely to have signs of depression than other people, after accounting for lots of things like income and demographics and things like that. And so we know that in and above diseases from rats, we know that rats affect us deeply when we have to live closely with them. And so rats affect both our physical and our mental health. And we know that what we're doing currently isn't working, as effectively as it could be because we're still having these rat challenges. And so contraception offers another tool. The other reason why we're interested in contraception is that so far the most common way to manage rats is by using rat poisons, otherwise known as anticoagulant rodenticides. But we know that these compounds affect much more than just rats. We know that pets and children can be exposed to rat poison and become ill. We also know that it's a really big issue for wildlife, and that's sort of the main impetus for this partnership with the Chicago Bird Alliance because there was a family of great horned owls in North Park a couple years ago. One by one, these owls succumbed to rat poison, and owls and other raptors, like other predatory birds, are particularly susceptible to rat poison. We've also done research of our own at Lincoln Park Zoo, and we've tested raccoons, skunks, and opossums that were euthanized for pest control. And we found that 100% of them tested positive for rat poison. So we know that these compounds are definitely getting into urban ecosystems. And so we want to find an alternative to rat poison that is more wildlife friendly. Adding to that, when we tested rats for rat poison exposure, we found that three-quarters of them tested positive, even though they were still alive when we trapped and sampled them. So these were rats that were running around on the landscape, could have been food for other animals and exposed them to rat poison. So still, if we're using rat poison, as intended, following the instructions, we still want rats to be exposed, right? But that's still a way for wildlife to be exposed if rats have rat poison in their system and then an owl comes and eats that rat. So we know what's getting out into the environment. So we need an alternative. So the goal of this project is to test whether rat activity declines over the long term on blocks with contraceptive feeding station. And when I say contraceptive, I mean it's like a birth control product that stops rats from reproducing if they eat it on an ongoing basis. So the product that we're evaluating is called Evolve by Senestech. And the way that it's a contraceptive, the active ingredient is that it's a sausage containing cottonseed oil. So cottonseed oil is the active ingredient at a concentration of 0.1 to 0.2%. So fairly low concentration. And the fact that the active ingredient is cottonseed oil qualifies this product as minimum risk by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And that just means that it's a product that the government considers to pose little to no risk for human health or the environment. And so we feel good about putting this product out there. It's also commercially available. Like you could go buy this at probably like a Home Depot or another pest control store. Um, and so it's a product that, if we find that it works, can sort of more easily scale up to other people using it too. It affects reproduction in both male and female rats, but like I said, the rats have to keep eating it on a constant basis, so every 30 days for that contraceptive effect to work. But since the concentration of the active ingredient is so low, larger animals like dogs, raccoons, coyotes, these larger bodied animals, they would have to eat several pounds on a routine basis to be affected. And so, in addition to that, we're also storing the sausages, you can see in this photo right here, in secured base stations that are designed to exclude birds and larger animals. So it's really a targeted approach to make sure that the rats are being exposed while excluding other animals. Evolve is already being used in Chicago, notably in Wicker Park and I think a couple other neighborhoods. Wicker Park was the first area to use Evolve. There was sort of a organization of businesses in Wicker Park that wanted to try contraception to alleviate their rat issues. And so they had been using, I think they've been using it for about a year now. I think they started last summer. And back in March, some promising signs were published in Block Club, namely that there were fewer rat complaints and lower signs of activity over the course of that project. What we're trying to do is slightly different in the sense that we're not just putting it out on in the environment and seeing if rat activity goes down. We're measuring rat activity in a few different ways, and we're also going to compare it to areas without the contraception. And I'll explain that in more detail. But it's very promising that this product is already being used in Chicago and it seems to be successful. So in this project, we started putting out Evolve in June of 2026 and it'll go until June of 2027. For the first 6 months of the project, the goal is to have the rats eat the sausages on a regular basis and have fewer babies as the months go on. And then in the latter half of the project, the last 6 months, we hope to see that both bait consumption and rat activity goes down as there were fewer rats running around because fewer rats were having babies. We're measuring rat activity in a couple of ways. One, by seeing how many sausages get eaten, with the assumption that if more sausages getting eaten, that probably means there's more rats in the area. But that has a lot of assumptions that like all rats eat the same amount of sausage, that it's not just the same rats coming back over and over again. So we're gonna add some other methods too. We're also putting camera traps aimed at these feeding stations to document how often rats are going into the bait stations to consume the sausages. In these videos, we're also going to be measuring the rats to see like what kind of age classes are we seeing? Are we actually seeing fewer, smaller juvenile rats over time, which would be our goal. And again, there the hope is that more visits to the feeders means more rats. To complement these cameras, we're also putting track plates out in the alleys, and these track plates are just like a plastic tube with a sheet of paper inside, and it has ink in the middle. And as the rats go through the tunnel to get the bait, they leave inky footprints on the paper. So it's just another way for us to measure rat activity in these areas. Another way that we're measuring rat activity is through standalone camera stations that don't have any evolve associated with them. It's in this white bucket here in this photo. We call it a rat cam. It's sort of a standalone, self-contained camera station that the rats run through in the alley. Um, and this setup lets us compare rat activity on the blocks with contraceptive feeding stations and blocks without contraceptive feeding stations. So we can more directly see, like, is it actually the contraception on these blocks that's causing a decrease in rat activity? And this is important because other things can affect rat activity, like season, for example. This is some work we did a few years ago where we looked at blocks that had more rat complaints than others, and why might that be? It tended to be because, blocks with more garbage tended to have more rats. But through that project, we looked at sort of seasonal fluctuations in rat complaints. And here, if you can see my cursor where it's pointing to control blocks, it really peaks in the summer and goes down in the winter. And so what we expect to see is that on the control blocks where we don't have any contraception, we expect to see rat activity to follow the seasonal pattern where it's lowest in the winter and then it climbs up to the summer and then it comes back down. But on the contraception blocks, we're hoping to see that we don't see that rise in rat activity next summer because there were fewer and fewer rats having young. Um, so for this project, when I'm talking about control blocks and contraception blocks, we're going to have 5 blocks that have the contraceptive feeding stations and 5 blocks that don't, that serve as a control. And the reason we're using blocks as our unit here is that some work on rat home range size and rat movement have found that rats typically stick to like one city block and they don't really like crossing major roads. And so that's why we're sort of using block as our unit. Speaking of blocks, here's a map showing the contraception blocks further south in blue at the bottom of the map next to the contraceptive feeding station here. So between Armitage, Mohawk, Menominee, and Sedgwick, these 5 here. And then our control blocks are those in the purple further north around like Orchard, Geneva, Belding, and what, Cleveland and Webster. So we have these blocks grouped together just so that we can sort of minimize the amount of like outside rats coming in. We want to see really for the rats that are living specifically on these blocks, are they having fewer babies over time? And then do we see fewer rats over time? Like I said, we're also, we want to make sure that we're not affecting other wildlife in the way that rat poison has been documented to affect other wildlife. We want to make sure that we're using something that is sustainable for wildlife and for urban ecosystems. And so we selected these blocks to not be next to any wildlife habitat. And we're going to be monitoring which species enter the feeding stations using cameras. And so if we see that other animals are getting into the feeding stations, we will make modifications to make them like even harder to get into, or maybe we'll even like move the stations a little bit, just to make sure that we're really targeting rats with this project. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and for funding from the Animal Welfare Institute and for our project partners. And I'm going to stop the full screen now, and I'd be happy to take any questions if anyone has any. Yeah, Maurice, please go ahead.
Thanks, Maureen. Really, thank you for the presentation. Really fantastic, and thank you for your dedication to the city and for hosting a call after hours on a
Yes.
Tuesday night. I live on one of the blocks, and that's why I wanted to join. And so I'm just interested to know what you think we'll see mostly on a block, like just in terms of I do have a dog. Sounds like it's not the sausage. First of all, it'd be hard for them to get into, and the sausage appears pretty benign. But just like all the containers, I'm in the alley a fair amount, and so and I have a child, so I just wanted to hear how much do you think I saw all the different pieces, but how many do you think we'll see in a given block?
Yeah, thanks for your question and thanks for the kind words. That's nice to hear. So yeah, in terms of feeding stations, Sarah, you can fact check me, but I believe we have 4 feeding stations per block, um, and 4 cameras. Is that right, Sarah?
Between 2 and 4, depending on the
Between 2 and
block.
4.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then we also have a similar number of track plates, and the track plates are like long black plastic tubes. In terms of what you should expect to see, the feeding stations look very similar to a bait station that you often also see in alleys. So I don't think it'll be like too jarring in terms of the stations themselves. I think what might be more noticeable is that we do have cameras locked to utility
Hmm.
poles on each feeding station. The cameras are very like just trained right on that feeding station. We're not going to get any videos of people, and it doesn't record any sound, so we're not like recording any audio of people talking or anything. But that's basically what you're going to see between two and four of these black boxes, which are really common around the city, and then a camera like aimed directly at the feeding station.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think part of this webinar too is to sort of raise awareness that something might be changing in the rats. We hope it's, eventually a positive that you're going to see fewer rats out there. It might seem for the first couple of months that you're seeing more rats like coming to those stations because we are like putting bait there and we want them to eat it so that they get contracepted. And so you might start to see like more rat activity around those feeding stations. But our thought is not that it's necessarily bringing in rats from like other blocks. It's just that the rats that were there are now really going to go to those bait stations. And so feel free to email us if you feel like you're seeing a lot more rats. Like we're always welcome to comments and questions, but just know that it is sort of expected that over the next couple of months, we do want the rats to come to those feeding stations. So it's not necessarily that more rats exist in the alley, it's just that they are honing in on those bait stations, if that makes sense.
Can I add something to Maureen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just also you might see those track plate tunnels that we
Oh, yeah.
mentioned. So those are just a black sort of tube looking thing. And we'll be having those will be out in the alleys. There are 8 per alley. So off and on basically for the course of the study. So we have put a sticker on them, so they might look a little bit like trash, but we did want to like let everyone know that you might see those and please don't throw them away.
Yeah, and those track tubes don't have any like contraception associated with them. So like, I don't know if your dog finds a track tube and like pulls out the paper or something, it's totally harmless. It's like ink and paper. It's not a big deal. Any other questions or comments, concerns? I'll also say that on the feeding stations and the cameras and the track plates, there is, or at least on the cameras anyway, there is like an email address that you can contact us. Basically, to make it easy to remember, it's Chicago Rat Project at lpzoo.org. And so if you ever have any questions or comments like outside of this webinar, we're always happy to hear from you. Great. Um, we'll also supplement this webinar with a flyer at some point. I'm sure the Alderman's office can and share like communications as the project develops. But yeah, any other questions or comments?
Just thanks again for doing this, and thanks, Maggie and the Alderman's office for setting it up. And best of luck on. I know the evaluation part of this is going to be the toughest, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it all sounds great to do an experiment and then you get it in the real world and you're like, oh, this is gets messy. But yeah, we're excited about it because it does seem like a promising tool that's well worth, investigating.
hard to do qualitative interviews with the rats.
100%. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time, everybody. I'll let you get back to your evening. And I'm sure the Alderman's office can share out a link to this recording too. So if you want to like review anything, we'll share that out. Thanks,
Yes,
everybody.
absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Murray. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.